So anything in our worldly life, we usually understand that results come after effort. So for example, if there is no farming, right, people will not go to the grocery store and say, how come we don't have fruits and vegetables? We understand there's a process. If there is no fishing, people won't go to the grocery store or fish market and say, why are there no fish and seafood on the table or for sale? Similarly, if there is no mining of precious metals, people will not go to the jewelry store and say, why is there no jewelry, gold, silver, platinum, diamond for sale? Why? Because there is a struggle and strife behind those results. So similarly in our deen, yes, Allah is the guide alone. Yes, whom Allah wants to guide, none can misguide. However, in our journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in our attainment of praiseworthy qualities and leaving off evil deeds and evil qualities, then there's also a choice by the servant. The servant has a choice. And one of the ways to better understand this journey and this, you can say process, is to take a look at this as a conceptual understanding that the human has a choice, an ikhtiyar, to do good or to do evil. And then also, what are those tools and agencies that can help them, by Allah's tawfiq, make the right choice more and more? And similarly, what are the negative influences that can lead them to make the wrong choice, and how they should be on guard and vigilant. So regarding this subject, that actually one of the ayat that Imam Muhammad read in surah, in the Salat al-Isha, in the second rak'ah of Surah al-Ahzab, that Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned why the human is unique in this context, right? That they have the ability to choose. So this first reading is from a scholar who passed away, I believe, 2018, Shaykh Mustafa Muslim, rahimahullah. He was especially gifted in the sciences of tafsir and Quran, and he has many good writings of them. He was originally from Egypt, and he taught in some of the Islamic universities in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or in Medina Munawwara. He also taught at Jami'atul Imam in Riyadh. So this is from a book he has, which is a discussion on the i'jaz, the miracles of the Quran. He says what makes a human being distinct. One of them is iradatuhu wa turuq al-khiyar ladayh, that the human being is distinct to receive this Quran as a revelation. One of them, he says, is because of his strong will and his ability to choose and select, or the options for him to select. He says, كلما اتسعت دائرة العلم لدى الكائن الحي اتسع مجال الاختيار عنده. He says, every time the realm, not the realm, but you can say the subject of knowledge expands for the human being, for the one that is living, then what expands for him also is the options he can select from. ولما كان الإنسان أكثر علما فهو أوسع إرادة لذا. And the human, the more knowledge he attains, the more expansive becomes his will. لذا, and for that, فهو يستطيع أن يتصرف أمام الحادث الواحد بأكثر من أسلوب ويستطيع اختيار الطريق الأنسب لمصالحه وتحقيق رغباته. He says that then the human being is able to select among from that which is in front of him of choice of events, be it one or more, by different approaches, and he is able to select the path that is most suitable for his benefits and attaining his ambitions. Okay, I think there's a typo in this PDF, but it says that also along with that understanding that there will be forces that will try to stop him from the right choice. قَدْ يَنْتَقِمُ أَوْ يَعْفُو. This human being has the choice when someone transgresses upon him. Do I want to take revenge or do I want to pardon? وَقَدْ يَكْذِمُ غَيْظَهُ أَوْ يُظْهِرَهُ. He can show off his anger or he can suppress his anger. وقد يداري في وقت ليترك الانتقام إلى الفرصة المواتية. He says that the human being, at one time, it can appear to him to leave off the choice of taking vengeance to a future time. He may want to take vengeance. وقد يجبن ويتخاذل ويستسلم. Or he can show cowardice. He may not have the courage to take vengeance, or he may surrender. وَقَدْ يَرُدُّ بِالْمِثْلِ أَوْ يَطْغَى. Or he could return the same amount of harm that was done to him, or he could exceed the amount of harm done to him. وَقَدْ يَتَرَفَّعْ فِي الرَّدِّ أَوْ يَسِفْ. He said that he could extend in his, not extend, but he could choose not to respond, or he could be fair in that. إلا أن مواقف الحيوان محدودة ولا يكون في الغالب إلا تصرف واحد تجاه الحادث الذي يتعرض له. And he says, except that in the experiences of the different animal species, they are restricted, and usually in most cases they only respond in one possible way, or they only make one possible choice in regards to the same phenomena or experience that they face. And then he mentions the verse Allah, he says in the Quran in Surah number 76, Surah Al-Dahr, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا وَإِمَّا كَفُورًا. Allah says after that He created the human being from a drop of fluid, of semen fluid, and we tested him and we made him the ability to see and hear. Then Allah says we guided him to the path where he can choose whether he will be grateful or ungrateful. So Shaykh Mustafa Muslim rahimahullah, he said, إن الإنسان الذي خلقه الله سبحانه وتعالى بهذه المثابة وأودع فيه هذه الطاقات والقدرات وأكرمه هذا التكريم وجعل له السيادة على مخلوقاته لم يخلقه عبثا ولن يتركه هملا. He said that this human being that Allah created, perfect is He, exalted, and He affirmed, or He gave him these faculties or these abilities, and for lack of a better translation, powers, and He honored him this honoring, and He made him the leader of all of His creations. He did not create him in vain, and He did not leave him without a purpose. Allah asked the rhetorical question in the Quran in Surah Al-Mu'minun, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. Do you think, all humans, that we created you in vain and to us you will not return? He also quotes the ayah, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَن يُتْرَكَ سُدًى. Allah said in Surah Al-Qiyamah, does the human being perceive that he will be left? This word suda is not explained by the author, but Imam al-Shafi'i, he said, أي لا يؤمر ولا ينهى عنه. That does this human think he was created and he was not ordered to do certain commandments, and he was not prohibited from certain bad deeds. And then the author says, إن كل ميزة تقابلها مسؤولية وتكليفا وعلى قدر عظم نعم الخالق سبحانه وتعالى على المخلوق تأتي التكاليف بأمور العبودية يقول تعالى. So he said that every distinction is opposed or is faced with a responsibility according to the measurement or the gravity of the blessing that Allah the Creator, perfect, you see, the exalted, gave to His creation, along with that blessing comes responsibilities that they should fulfill in their servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then this comes to the verse where Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned the responsibility, moral responsibility that humans have. Allah said in Surah Al-Ahzab, إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَحْمِلْنَاهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Allah said, indeed we presented the aman, the trust. So the previous generations of the early Muslims, the Sahaba, Tabi'un, some as Abdullah ibn Abbas or Abu Ali al-Riyahi from the Tabi'un, they say that this trust is free will. Allah presented free will. You can choose to do good or bad on the skies and the earth and the mountains, but they refuse. And they refused to bear this responsibility, and they fell humble before it. And Allah, He said, we gave this responsibility to the human being, the human being took this responsibility. And then Allah, He said, the human being in his unrefined state, is excessively unjust, excessively oppressive, and excessively ignorant. So this is their unrefined state. But when they learn revelation and act on it, they come out of ignorance and they come out of wrongdoing, of oppression. Uncle Hanif is looking for you. Uncle Hanif? And it says, إن الأمانة كما فسرها كثير من المفسرين هي التكاليف العبودية لله سبحانه وتعالى. Then the author says, this word amana, trust, many of the exegesis, the scholars of tafsir in the Quran, they have explained it as the responsibility of servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so this is just an introduction to understand what makes the human unique and different. The other part is where one of the scholars of also the 20th century, but he lived in the earlier part, Shaykh Abdurrahman Yahya al-Mu'allimi al-Yamani, rahimahullah, was a Yemeni scholar, and he loved knowledge so much that one of the large libraries in Makkah Mukarramah, that he was found dead on top of his books. He was reading books so much, people used to see him not knowing who he was, and that even, who's more famous than him, Shaykh Muhammad Nasruddin al-Albani, after the death of Shaykh Abdurrahman Yahya al-Mu'allimi, he asked him, he said, yeah, I just used to see him reading, but he loved him so much, Allah gave him this kind of death. And it is a weak hadith, extremely weak, but it says that whoever dies while he is seeking knowledge, then there will be no rank between him and the prophets in Jannah except the rank of prophethood, right? Okay, so anyway, this is a treatise he wrote called Al-Ta'at fi Tasheeh al-Aqaid, which after looking at it, I've only lived here in my life, but it gives a context to living in a non-Muslim society where people are free to do evil as they want, and contextualizing what is the role of human choice. So part of that, he says that that the human being, just as it is difficult upon him to be firm on the truth when it is in difficult times, such as it is in the times of extreme ease and fortune, good fortune, because the good fortune calls him into this word إلى التوسع في اللذات والاستكثار من الشهوات. Good times call to enjoying one's pleasures and increasing in pursuing their passion, their desires. والتكاسل على الطاعات. And good times and fortune actually lead them to being lazy from doing the obedience, acts of obedience. والتكبر على الناس. And good fortune times leads one, they're not careful, to having pride and arrogance over people and other things he says. But he says, وَفِي الصَّبْرِ عَنْ ذَلِكَ مَا فِيهِ مِنَ الْمَشَقَّةِ. So this reading, the reason I was bringing is on the topic of determination, right? So he says, in sabr, sabr is not just patience, it can be endurance. Its Arabic translation is habsun nafs, is to restrain oneself and hold oneself there. So he says, in sabr, from that, there is many different difficulties. He says another one is أَنَّ مَنْ اسْتَحْوَذَ عَلَيْهِ إِثَارُ الْبَاطِلِ تَكُونُ الدُّنْيَا أَعْظَمُ هَمًّا. The one who has been overtaken by preferring falsehood, the dunya, Allah. I can smell it from here, right? Allah.
Okay, that was
so he says that this is the best thing. I feel like I'm in Palestine when I drink this tea. This is أَنَّ مَنْ اسْتَحْوَذَ عَلَيْهِ إِثَارُ الْبَاطِلِ تَكُونُ الدُّنْيَا أَعْظَمُ هَمًّا. The one who is overtaken by choosing falsehood, the dunya becomes his number one or his greatest aspiration. فهو من جهة إذا توفرت له نعم الدنيا ولم تنله مصائبها رضي عن ربه ودينه. He says that when the person, from one angle, he has all of the blessings of the dunya, and its trials or its calamities do not afflict him, then رضي عن ربه ودينه, he is pleased with his Lord and his religion. وإذا أصابته المصائب سخط. But when the calamities come to that person, he becomes displeased and angry, upset. ومن جهة أخرى يعد النعم الدنيا ومصائبها أعظم الدليل على رضا الله عز وجل وسخطه. Another angle, which is from ignorance, a person may think the blessings of this world and its calamities is the greatest indicator of Allah being pleased with them, or the absence of them is the greatest indicator of Allah's anger. فإذا يسرت له نعم الدنيا ولم تنله مصائبها زعم أن الله عز وجل راض عنه وعن دينه وعن عمله. He says that when the blessings of the dunya become easy for that person and its calamities do not affect him, he solemnly affirms, or he solemnly claims that Allah is pleased with him and his religion and his action. وإلا زعم أن الله عز وجل ساخط عليه وعلى دينه وعلى عمله. But otherwise, he may claim, if he does not have the blessings of this dunya, that Allah is angry with him and his religion and his action. And then he quotes some of the verses of the Quran where Allah mentions them, and most of them are referring to the state of the disbeliever. And he says, وَهَذِهِ كَانَتْ شُبْهَةُ فِرْعَوْنَ كَمَا بَيَّنْتُهُ فِي الْكِتَابِ وَعِبَادِ اللَّهِ. He says this was the misconception of Fir'aun, as was mentioned in his book he wrote about ibadah. Fir'aun, he said that أَمْ أَنَا خَيْرٌ أَمْ هَذَا الَّذِي هُوَ مَهِينٌ وَلَا يَكَادُ يُبِينُ فَلَوْلَا أُلْقِيَ عَلَيْهِ أَسْوِرَةٌ وَفِي قِرَاءَةٍ أَسَاوِرَةٌ مِنْ ذَهَبٍ أَوْ جَاءَ مَعَهُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ مُقْتَرِنِينَ. Fir'aun said, am I not better, or this one referring to Musa, who is disgraced or humiliated in front of the people, and he cannot articulate. Because Musa, when he was a baby, he picked up the burning stone and that gave his tongue a stammer. And even when Musa was sent to Fir'aun, he asked Allah in the ayah in Surah Al-Qasas, the ayah I'm trying to remember when he mentioned about Harun alayhi salam, huwa afsahu minni lisan. Harun is more eloquent than me in speech. So Fir'aun said this, and then he said, why weren't there given gold bracelets to Musa, or why weren't the angels flocking around him? So this was his misconception, where he thought he was better than Musa alayhi salam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in Surah Al-Fajr. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانَنِ وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانني. Well, he says that as with the human being, when his Lord tries him, bala, a trial is not just hard times, but good times is a trial as well. And it's a harder trial because you don't know you're being tried, right? Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, "Ubtulina bid-dharra'i fasabarna." That in the times of Mecca, when they were persecuted for being Muslim, he said we were tried with difficult times, and then we were patient. Or even after the migration, when the mushrikun tried to attack them, and battle after battle after battle, he said we were patient. He said we were tried in the times of ease, but we were not patient. Right? So this also shows if they were the best of this ummah, how hard the test is for other than them. So anyway, continuing with the quote of Imam Abdul Rahman Yahya al-Mu'allimi, he says, وَمُخَالَفَةُ الْهَوَى لِلْحَقِّ فِي الْاعْتِرَافِ بِالْحَقِّ. He says, الدِّينُ عَلَى دَرَجَاتٍ. The religion is on ranks or levels. كَفٌّ عَمَّا نُهِيَ عَنْهُ. Staying away from what one was prohibited from. وَعَمَلُ مَا أُمِرَ بِهِ. Doing what one was commanded in action. وَاعْتِرَافٌ بِالْحَقِّ. And recognizing the truth. وَاعْتِقَادٌ لَهُ وَعِلْمٌ بِهِ. Having a firm, like a certainty and creed about that and knowledge. وَمُخَالَفَةُ الْهَوَى لِلْحَقِّ فِي الْكَفِّ وَاضِحًا. It says opposing one's hawa. So hawa is something unique, right? So there is shaitan, there is the nafs, right? So the nafs and the ruh is the same thing. What the difference is, when it is out of the body, it is called ruh. So when Allah told the angels, فَإِذَا نَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. When I blow into Adam, my ruh, and that doesn't mean it's Allah's spirit, it's just idafa lit-tashrif. Idafa is when you make an inclination between two things. So for example, the masjid, we say the house of Allah, right? Doesn't mean Allah lives in the house. Out of respect, we say it is the house of Allah. So this is Allah saying, when I blow into him my spirit, then bow down to him in prostration. But the nafs is when it is in the body. That's why when the person is passing away, or the angel of death comes, it says, Ya ayyatuha an-nafsul khabitha, or Ya ayyatuha an-nafsul tayyiba, ukhruji ila sakhatin min Allahi wa ghadab. If it is an evil soul, it will be saying, Oh, you evil, filthy soul, come out to the anger of Allah. Or if it is a pleasant soul, ukhruji ila rahmatin min Allahi wa ridwan. Come out to the mercy of Allah and His pleasure. So this is the only thing. So we have the shaitan, we know, the nafs, and then the hawa, the definition of it. This is what the nafs calls to.
What is mutmainna then?
So we'll come inshallah in the lecture. There's 3 classifications in the Quran of the nafs. Some scholars hold there are different nafs altogether, depending on the person's life. Some scholars hold, like Shaykh Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen, that depending on what the person does in that circumstance, then he has that aspect of what is known as nafs ammara, that only calls him to evil. Or nafs lawama. Nafs lawama is, it does good, but when it doesn't do good or it does evil, it feels remorseful. It will tell it, why did you do that? That was not right. You shouldn't. So this is an attribute. And the other one, nafs mutma'inna, that scholars mention that it is the one that tu'minu bi liqa'illah, it believes in the meeting with Allah, wa tarda bi qada'illah, and it is content with whatever Allah decrees, وَتَقَنَعُوا بِعَطَائِهِ. And whatever Allah gave them in this world, they had contentment with it. Or they fulfilled all of the...
Mutmainna means contentment, is it?
The linguistic meaning, correct. It is a contented soul or pleasant soul. But the attributes to have it is not just the person feels content and they fall in that category, but they fulfilled all of Allah's commandments, they stayed away from His prohibitions, they did the meritorious deeds, they stayed away from the makruhat, and they didn't waste their time in the mubahat. So he says al-hawa. So the hawa is what the nafs calls to. Allah he says وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. The one who is afraid of the day he stands in front of his Lord and he suppresses his nafs from its hawa, its desires. فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. Jannah will be that one's abode. Where Allah also said in Surah An-Najm that إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسِ. That the mushrikun, when they created these false gods and names, Allah he says they only follow what is known as conjecture. It's not fact, it's not true, it's just conjecture. وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسِ, and what their nafs desires. So hawa is usually translated as كل ما يخالف الحق وللنفس فيه حظ ورغبة وللنفس فيه حظ ورغبة من الأقوال والأفعال والمقاصد. That everything that opposes the truth, and the nafs has a share in it. The nafs has a share in it, whether it is speech or actions or intentions. If I keep going with this quote, it's going to take too long, but I thought it was good. Okay. So, there are some categories to understand this concept in different categories of creation. So Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah has a beautiful book on sabr and shukr. He titled it Uddatu Sabirin wa Dakhiratu Shakirin. In the beginning he mentions regarding a sabr fi inqisamihi bi'atibari mahal. How the concept of sabr categorizes or classifies regarding to its place. So he says as-sabru darban. Sabr is in two categories, or you can say two positions. Darbun badaniyun wa darbun nafsani. Part of sabr has to do with the human body, and part of it has to do with the nafs. وَكُلُّ مِنْهُمَا نَوْعَانِ. And each one of them has its own two categories. اختياري واضطراري. Some sabr is you choose it, right? You have a choice. You can complain, you can, mouth off, you can do, or you can choose to bite the bullet and do what you need to do. The other one is ittirar. You don't have a choice. For example, your leg got cut off. What you gonna do? You can't do anything, right? فَهَذِهِ أَرْبَعَةُ أَقْسَامٍ. So he says these are four categories. Number one, the body and its choosing of patience. He says كَتَعَاطِ الْأَعْمَالَ الشَّاقَ عَلَى الْبَدْنِ اخْتِيارًا وَإِرَادًا. Like doing cumbersome deeds of the body with choosing it and willfully. Number two, al-badan al-ittirar. Patience with the body, it doesn't have a choice. كالصبر على ألم الضرب والمرض والجراحات والبرد والحر وغيره. Like the person's body being patient on the pain of being beaten, or being sick, or having wounds, or extreme hot or extreme cold. Now for the nafs, he says an-nafs al-ikhtiyar. The category of the nafs inwardly choosing patience. كصبر النفس عن فعل ما لا يحسن فعله شرعا ولا عقلا. Like holding the nafs back from doing an action that is not good, whether it is in the sharia or when it comes to logic. Because the aql in Islam, what is the word aql? Is that it holds one back from doing hideous or unpleasant things. That's what aql is for, right? Number four, النفساني الاتراري. What is the category of patience where the nafs doesn't have a choice? كصبر النفس عن محبوبها قهرا إذا حيل بينها وبين. Like the one having to be patient when his beloved has been separated from him out of being overwhelmed, out of being overpowered and being separated from one's beloved. This is that example he gives. So he says, when you recognize these categories, فهي مختصة بنوع الإنسان دون البهائم. It is a special category the human has that the animals don't have. ومشاركة للبهائم في نوعين منها. And he shares two of these categories with the animals. right? وهما صبر البدن والنفس الاضطرارين. The animals have a category where their body and their inward emotion, you can say, have no choice but to be patient, right? وقد يكون بعضها أقوى صبرا من الإنسان وإنما يتميز الإنسان عنها بنوعين الاختياريين. وكثير من الناس تكون قوة صبره في النوع الذي يشارك فيه البهائم لا في النوع الذي يخص الإنسان فيعد صابرا وليس من الصابر. Then he says that the human being, or he says, some of these categories could be stronger in patience than the other for the human, and the human becomes distinct from these two categories when he selects and chooses patience voluntarily. And many of the humans, he said, their ability of patience in a category that they share with the animals, not in the category that makes them distinct as humans. وكثير من الناس تكون قوة صبره في النوع الذي يشارك فيه البهائم. Some humans, their only capacity of patience is the one they share with the humans, not in the category that makes them distinct as humans, so that they will be counted as a patient in Allah's eyes, but they're not from the patience. So he says, فَإِنْ قِيلَ هَلْ يُشَارِكُ الْجِنُّ وَالْإِنسِ فِي هَذَا الصَّبْرِ. The question is, do the jinn and the humans share with each other this attribute of a sabr? He said, نعم هذا من لوازم التكليف. He says, yes, because this necessitates what we said in earlier, moral responsibility. The jinn and the human have moral responsibility. وهو مظنة الأمر والنهي, that they have to fulfill Allah's commandments and stay away from His prohibitions. والجن مكلفون بالصبر على الأوامر والصبر عن النواهي كما كلفنا نحن بذلك. He says the jinn are responsible for being patient on Allah's commandments and being patient from staying away from His prohibitions, just as we humans are. فإن قيل فهل هم مكلفون على الوجه الذي كلفنا نحن به أم على وجه آخر. Okay, I'll skip this part. He says, are the jinn just as accountable as us or as others? Now he gives an example about the angels. One capacity humans have of angels, we hear this a lot, and one capacity they have as animals. So he says, فإن قيل فهل تشاركنا الملائكة في شيء من أقسام الصبر. Do the angels share with us any categories of patience? So he said, الملائكة لم يبتلوا بهواء يحارب عقولهم ومعارفهم. The angels are not tried with the hawa, we said what the nafs desires, that is combating against their intellect or understanding and their recognition. There's a debate of scholars, do the angels also have aql as the humans have? بل العبادة والطاعة لهم كالنفس لنا. He says the worship for the angels and their obedience is like how we have breathing. It's their nature. كالنفس. فلا يتصور في حقهم الصبر الذي حقيقته ثبات باعث الدين والعقل في مقابلة باعث الشهوة والهوى. He says that it is not possible to perceive that the right or in their regard of angels of patience, its reality being staying upright and firm upon the religion, وَالْعَقْلُ فِي مُقَابَلَةِ بَيْعَةِ الشَّهْوَةِ وَالْهَوَى, is not also correct to perceive that they have the aql which is being combated on in their innate desires, and the hawa translation in English, which I'm thinking is from a different century, is called caprice. Caprice is the translation of hawa. وإن كان لهم صبر يليق بهم وهو ثباتهم وإقامتهم على ما خلقوا له من غير منازعة هوى أو شهوة أو طبع. He says that if the angels have patience, sabr, which is befitting of them, it is their remaining upright and firm on what they were created for, without having any resistance of a caprice, hawa, or desire or nature. He says, as for the human being, إذا غلب صبره باعث الهوى والشهوة التحق بالملائكة. Now this is the point I wanted to bring, is that the human, or the human amongst us, when his patience overpowers what his hawa, his caprice and desires call to, then he reaches the angels. وَإِنْ غَلَبَ بَعِثُ الْهَوَى وَالشَّهْوَةِ صَبْرَهُ الْتَحَقَ بِالشَّهْوَةِ. But when his desires and his caprice take over his patience, then he reaches the shayateen. وَإِنْ غَلَبَ بَعِثُ طَبْعِهِ مِنَ الْأَكْلِ وَالشُّرْبِ وَالْجِمَاعِ صَبْرَهُ الْتَحَقَ بِالْبَهَائِمِ. And I think if he saw what people call themselves today, foodie, this would be the definition. He said, when the human being's nature of eating and drinking and reproducing with the opposite gender overtakes his power, then he reaches the rank of the Okay, I'm sorry, those quotes took a little longer, but I wanted to contextualize that one. Is in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal brings up the concept of Al-Azimah. Al-Azimah, which I wanted to start with the ayat. Azim, his is Ain, Dha, Ya, Mim. Azima is Ain, Zai, Ya, Mim, Ta marbuta. So the definition of Al-Azima, which in English I found was determination. Imam Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali rahimahullah explains in his treatise, he explains the hadith of Shaddad ibn Aws, which is found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah and Musnad Imam Ahmad, where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, إِذَا كَنَزَ النَّاسُ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ فَاكْنِزُوا أَنْتُمْ هَؤُلَاءِ الْكَلِمَاتِ. When the people take gold and silver as treasure, then you should take this dua as a treasure. This is how he introduced the dua. Right? So in that dua he started, he said, Allahumma inni as'aluka thabata fil amr wa la azimata ala rushd. Right? So thabata fil amr is, Ibn Rajab, he said, ad-din wa ta'a, being firm on the religion and Allah's obedience. And the ayat of istiqamah are given and uprightness. Now the point of the lecture was al-azimah. The second thing he told them to ask for was to have determination on ar-rushd. So ar-rushd, he says, is ta'atullahi wa li-rasuli, or ta'atullah wa rasuli, obedience to Allah and His Messenger. And rushd, it is the opposite of al-ghay. Ghay is one being wandering aimlessly or misled blindly. Allah, He said that in the ayah after in the ayah after Ayatul Kursi, La ikraha fi din qad tabayyana ar-rushdu min al-ghay. That rushd, obedience to Allah and His Messenger, is clear from al-ghay. So now, what is the definition he gives of, or sorry, not the definition of al-azima, but he mentions there's categories. He says that number one, أحدهم عزم المريد على الدخول في الطريق. The first category of azima is when the servant of Allah wants to enter the path, to start. For example, if a person wants to, if they want to pursue a degree, their first level of ambition is to get admission to the university. That's one category of it, right? So this is one, he says, وَهُوَ مِنَ الْبِدَايَاتِ. It is from the precursor, the beginning stages. So we need that to start the journey, right? This is a shubha, this is a misconception where some people are like, oh, if I want to pray 5 times a day, like when I was in Texas in December, I was surprised because this person was like in his 50s, he's from Muslim country, I used to hear this when I was like in my adolescence and teenagers from people who never lived in an Islamic society and were young in age because they didn't have knowledge. But he said, I haven't prayed Salah for 30-something years, he said. He said, if I want to pray Salah, I have to be committed. I said, no, who told you that? We're always going to make mistakes and you don't judge yourself if you're committed. He said, but I have to change. I said, we'll get you clothes right now. We'll take you to shower now. Pray to Allah. He said, you're getting straight to the point. I said, what other point is there? SubhanAllah. People, shaitan play with them and make them think if I pray 5 times a day, I can't make a mistake. No, Allah made salah so your sins get forgiven. Right? Rasulullah said, what if a man between his house and his work was 5 streams and he bathed in them? Will anything be left of dirt on his body? He said no. He said, كَذَلِكَ مِثْلُ صَلَوَاتِ الْخَمْسِ يَمْحُ اللَّهُ بِهِنَّ الْخَطَايَا. He said the 5 salahs like that. Allah wash away your sins. So this is the thing. The azimah is needed. When the person knows, I have to pray, or I have to fast, or I have to cover up, or I can't eat this, that's prohibited, or I can't smoke that, or I can't. They need a certain level of azimah. They need a determination. The second part, Imam Ibn Rajab, he said, الثاني العزم على الاستمرار على الطاعات بعد الدخول فيها. Having determination on being persistent on the obedience after you entered the path. And he says, وَعَلَى الْإِنْتِقَالِ مِنْ حَالٍ كَامِلٍ إِلَى حَالٍ أَكْمَلَ مِنْهُ. Or determination is needed after you attain one good level and you want to go to a level better than it. وَهُوَ مِنَ النِّهَايَةِ. And he said that is from the end levels of it. And he mentions many beautiful examples, but there's not enough time, of the life of the great and righteous Khalifa Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and how he was the exemplar example of being in, of azimah. I'll just mention one of them because many lessons can come from it. So he says that فأول ما بدأ به summarize. So he says that the first thing that Umar ibn Aziz did as Khalifa was that after Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik was the Khalifa who passed him, is that he, after the burial of him, he got busy in his burial, and when he returned from his burial, he mentioned some lines of poetry. ولولا النهى ثم التقى خشية الردى لعاصيت في حب الصباء كل زاجري قضى ما قضى فيما مضى ثم لا يرى له عودة أخرى الليالي الغوابر. Then he said ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله قربوا إلي بغلي. So he's the Khalifa and he asked the people, bring me my mule. Like, you can ride the best horse ever. And he's asking, a mule is when you mix a donkey and a horse. So anyway, the point I wanted to get to was the story where it said, imagine he just started his life as a Khalifa, right? He rode his mount or his mule, وَسَارَ مُسْتَصْحِبًا لِتِلْكَ الْعَزِيمَةِ. And he had this determination, azimah. And Allah knew the truth in it, Ibn Rajab says, and He helped him upon this. فَأَوَّلُ مَا بَدَأَ بِهِ أَنَّهُ سَارَ بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ أهل الموكب فنحاهم وقال إنما أنا رجل من المسلمين ثم نزل فقعد فقام الناس بين يديه فقعدوا وقال إنما يقوم الناس لرب العالمين. So in certain parts of the world when there's an inauguration, there's this rows and lines of people. So he told them that the only one that is worthy of standing for is Allah on the Day of Judgment, as Allah said in Surah, I believe, Al-Mutaffifin. Then he had the determination to return the madhalim, the unjustly taken properties from the Khalifas before him. فأدركته القائلة وكان قد تعب وسهر تلك الليلة لموت سليمان بن عبد الملك. So what happened, it came to the time of what we say qilula. In the midday, it's so hot, people need to take a nap. So he was awake the whole night trying to return the unjustly taken properties of the people who surpassed him in the khilafah. So he said, فَدَخَلَ لِيَقِيلِ. He went into his home so he could take a nap. And look at how Allah blessed him with a righteous son. He was a righteous Khalifa. Allah knows the implication of it. But when Umar Abdul Aziz passed away, they said a paper fell from the sky on his grave. And you opened this paper and it said, Bara'atullah li'Umar Abdul Aziz min al-nar. He said that this is a exoneration that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending, that Umar Abdul Aziz is exonerated from the hellfire. So this is who he was. But look at his son. So when his father went in to take the nap, فجاءه ابنه عبد الملك فقال له, his son Abdul Malik told him, أتنام وما رددت المظالم? He said, my father, you're going to take a nap and you didn't return these properties back to their people? You know, when the state takes something and says this is state property. Islamically, there was no precedence for this for the other Khalifas to do, right? So he said, you're taking a nap and you didn't return this property. So what his father said, he said, إِذَا صَلَّيْتُ الظُّهْرِ رَدَدْتُهَا. I'm just going to take a nap. When I pray dhuhr, I'll return it. So look at his son, what he told him. He said, وَمَنْ لَكَ أَن تَعِيشَ إِلَى الظُّهْرِ. He said, who promised you you're going to live till dhuhr? His son told, who's going to promise you you're going to live till dhuhr? وَإِنْ عِشْتَ فَمَنْ لَكَ أَن تَبْقَى لَكَ نِيَّةٌ. And then the second point he said, even if you live till dhuhr, how do you know you're going to fulfill your intention? So what did the father do? فَقَامَ وَخَرَجَ وَنَادَى الصَّلَاةَ جَامِعًا. He called the people and he said, come together. فَاجْتَمَعَ النَّاسِ. The people assembled. فَرَدَّ الْمَظَالِمِ. He returned the properties that were taken unjustly. وَجَاءَ بِكُتُبِ الْقُرَّى وَالْأَمْلَاكِ الَّتِي كَانَتْ فِي يَدِهِ مِنْ إِقْطَاعِ بَنِي أُمَيَّةِ. And he asked for all of the registries, you can say, that were in the different lands of the Khilafah that used to be owned by the clan of Banu Umayyah. Banu Umayyah was the clan of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. After he chose his son Yazid, then the Khilafah, as the Prophet ﷺ said, it would become mulk, like a kingdom. A father picks a son like that, right? So Umar Abdul Aziz was from that clan. And he said that فَمَزَّقَهَا كُلَّهَا. He tore all the scrolls that were used for this purpose of taking wealth unjustly. وَرَدَّ تِلْكَ الْقُرَى إِلَى بَيْتِ مَالِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And he returned those, He turned the villages that were taken to the Muslim treasury. Okay, ikhwa, very quickly to go through because there's not enough time to go through explanation. But Allah mentioned the unique thing of Azima in the Quran. Like for example, the story of Adam alayhi salam in Surah Taha. Allah He said, وَلَقَدْ عَهِدْنَا إِلَىٰ آدَمَ مِن قَبْلُ فَنَسِيَ وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. That we can take lesson from the stories of prophets, but we don't speak about their faults, because that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them a status of usma, of protection, but that doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. So Allah He said in Surah Taha that we had a covenant with Adam before, referring to in Al-Jannah when He told him not to eat from the tree, but he ate from it. But Allah He said فَنَسِيَ. So nasiya in Arabic, it can mean tarku sahwan or tarku amdan. You can leave something accidentally, as we say, I forgot. Or nasiya can also mean leaving it intentionally. And this is important to know because in many places in America for some years, because I used to hear since I was a child, that when these verses come in the Quran, Nasullaha fanasiyahum. Or Allah He said, فَذُوقُوا بِمَا نَسِيتُمْ لِقَاءَ يَوْمِكُمْ هَذَا إِنَّا نَسِينَاكُمْ. Or Allah He said, فَالْيَوْمَ نَنْسَاهُمْ كَمَا نَسُوا لِقَاءَ يَوْمِهِمْ هَذَا. But some people say, Allah says, أعوذ بالله, we forgot them like they forgot us. It's not right to say Allah forgets, because Allah only has perfect attributes. Allah cannot be attributed with insulting or blameworthy or deficient attributes. So when Allah says this word nasu, it means He will intentionally leave them in the fire. It's not that He forgets. Because Allah, He said when Musa alayhi salam mentioned in Surah Taha, لا يضل ربي ولا ينسى. My Lord doesn't make mistakes and He doesn't forget. Right? Okay, so this is what Allah said in this ayah. But the point we want to come to is وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. Allah said we did not find from Adam this quality of determination. So this shows us amongst the prophets there was ranks. Because Allah quoted the 5 best prophets as what? فَاصْبِرْ كَمَا صَبَرَ أُولُو الْعَزْمِ مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. Prophet Nuh, Musa, Ibrahim, or Nuh, Ibrahim, Musa, Isa, and Muhammad. That's chronological order. But the scholars say in the order of virtue is Muhammad, then Ibrahim, then Musa, then Isa, then Nuh. The best 5 messengers, Allah mentioned they had one defining characteristic, it's called Azima. They had resolve. Why? Because come rain, snow, sleet, hail, this military, hunger, poverty, my wife dies, my kids die, I lose this, they don't waver. They don't buckle. No matter what they have to go against, they had this quality. So anyway, this from what Shaykh Muhammad Amin al-Shinqiti rahimahullah mentioned in his tafsir of Adwa al-Bayan. About this part, about Adam alayhi salam, he did not have azm. He says this indicates that our father Adam alayhi salam, and also upon our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, ليس من الرسل الذين قال الله فيهم فاصبر كما صبر العزم الرسل. That they were not from those that Allah said about them, be patient like those prophets or messengers of determination. He says they are Nuh, Ibrahim, Musa, Isa, and Muhammad. And he says that about this ayah that Abdullah ibn Abbas said, وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا, we did not find from Adam determination, أي لم نجد له صبرا عن أكل الشجرة ومواظبة على الالتزام الأمر. So we did not find from him, Allah is saying, that according to Ibn Abbas, patience to not eat from the fruit of the tree or the tree and not being consistent on fulfilling the command. So this is just one example. And he said, وَأَنْ يَكُونَ نَقِيضُ الْعَدْمِ. Azm is the opposite of the word adam when something is non-existent in Arabic language. And then going back to the word of Shaykh Muhammad Amin al-Shinqiti rahimahullah, in the ayah of Surah Al-Ahqaf where Allah mentioned those 5 messengers have this quality, and how we know there are these 5 messengers. Allah, He said in another part of the Quran in Surah Al-Ahzab, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ مِيثَاقَهُمْ وَمِنْكَ وَمِنْ نُوحٍ وإبراهيم وموسى وعيسى بن مريم وأخذنا منهم ميثاقا غليظا. Allah mentioned that He took the oath from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and from Nuh and Ibrahim and Musa and Isa alayhim salam. So Allah, He said, be patient like those prophets or messengers of determination were patient. He told this to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And He says that after mentioning who those 5 are, He says, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْقَوْلِ بِأَنَّ الْمُرَادِ بِأُولِي الْعَزْمِ جَمِيعًا الرسل عليهم الصلاة والسلام وأن لفظة من في قوله من الرسل بيانية يظهر أنه خلاف التحقيق. He mentions his proof why it is incorrect to say all the messengers are included in these 5 and it is supposed to be those 5. But he says that okay, maybe I was mistaken. I thought I saw it in here. So this just shows us that this is what made the best prophets who they were. The best prophets who they were. Now, I do realize this is a bit late, but as they say, save the best for last, or save dessert for the end. But there were some stories I wanted to read to see in the earlier lives, the lives of the earlier generations, on how they had determination, how they had azima, and doing those things that many times we find is very common, and the speaker is not innocent of it, is that we say, you know what, I'm going to start this, for example. Like, it's very common. If you ask the teachers of, let's say, Tajweed, or Arabic language, or some of the sciences of Islam, what is the day the most students come? It's always the first class. And then week 2, week 3, week 4, you'll find the numbers less, and then you're left with only a few. It was so sad. I even know one great teacher, scholar, he's in his 70s, and he's a convert Muslim. He gave a lecture in this masjid, how he became a Muslim in the 70s. He used to be a musician, and he said even when he took Shahada in Ethiopia, he went by sea to Hajj and he had his guitar for Hajj. He didn't know, he didn't know. But that's where but he studied with great scholars. He studied in al-Qura in Mecca. He studied with scholars of Saudi, Syria, other countries, right? And he specialized in hadith. And in 2023 August, the goal was to explain the book Mishkat al-Masabih, right? It's a unique book of hadith because it covers all the chapters of hadith books, and the author Alama Tabrizi, he brought the hadith from the major collections. So you basically know what's in those collections when you study this. By like June 2024, there was only 3 students left on the Zoom. And mashallah, 2 of them was the girls. Most of the class was girls. They're the most consistent one. And the teacher, before he could finish the book, we got to Kitabul Libas. We have like a whole volume to go. They had to cancel the class because no students coming to the class. So what happened is, they ran out of Azimah. They ran out of determination. Right? So sometimes the person says, you know what, I want to memorize Quran. And they ask all these questions. How do I do this, and how do I do that, and how do I theory. And then instead of just putting in the work and showing up and coming for whatever, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, they put so much focus on, well, I have to have, I have to live in this country. For example, people, they romanticize Islamic knowledge. I have to study the Quran in Mecca because it was revealed in Mecca. Or I have to study the Hadith in Medina because that's the Prophet's city. And this and that. And I have to go here and there. Where you are, put in the work. It's like somebody wants to be like UFC champion, right? Just go to the gym and start workout. Put your body in shape. You can talk about it and dance around it and this. Just put in work. Start sweat. Just start working out, So this is one thing I wanted to say, is that if a person, when he has determination, he just has to put in the time, because you don't get results without time. Well, one amazing example, I remember in 2008, in the end of 2008, beginning 2009, I met one international Muslim student who was doing his PhD research in USC, right? And we went in the Da'wah Khuruj for 40 days or so. And in those days, there's no smartphone, right? So this is how he memorized Quran. He was in his 30s, right? He would print out the ayat like from a printer, and he would tape it on his steering wheel in the car. Because LA traffic, sometimes 3 hours you going nowhere. And that's how he memorized Quran. He just taped it on his steering wheel and he put in the work. Another person, I don't know him personally, but one teacher, I know of him, he said he knows someone. He said, you know what? I'm going to use the time between the adhan and iqamah of Asr. Just not the whole Asr time. Between adhan and iqamah of Asr. He said, I'm going to start memorizing Riyadh al-Salihin. He gave that time, in like 1 year, he memorized Riyadh al-Salihin. It's just putting in that time. That's it. So anyway, this shows their determination. The point I wanted from this stories was, one, to show that everyone before us went through tests. When you want a goal, Allah is going to test you. And number 2, when that goal means something to you, you have to give what you love to get there, because that goal means something. So this is a story of Abu Hatim al-Razi, rahimahullah. He was one of the imams of Jarh and Ta'adil and Hadith. Like, when you hear this narrator is thiqa, and this narrator is thabt, and this narrator is da'if, and this narrator is... So his specialty was ranking the narrators. He was from the 5th century of the Hijrah, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Alright. So he says, سمعت أبي يقول. He said, so this is Abu Hatim hearing from his father. He said, I heard from my father say, بقيت بالبصرة في سنة 14 و200. Okay, I'm wrong. He was not from 5th century. But he said that I was in the city of Basra in the year of 214. 8 أشهر. I was there for 8 months in Basra. وكان في نفسي أن أقيم سنة. He said, my intention when I came to Basra, I'm going to stay a full year, 12 months to learn. فانقطعت نفقتي. He said, after 8 months, I ran out of money. This happens to students of knowledge. You can see on their recordings, some of the famous ones, he said, I was left in a country with bad water, all I did was boil that water and drink it. I didn't have money for food. It happens, right? So he said, I ran out of money. فَجَعَلْتُ أَبِيعُ الثِّيَابَ بَدَنِي شَيْئًا بَعْدَ شَيْءٍ. So what happened, Abdullah?
No.
He said, the clothes that I came with, I started selling one by one. Because he didn't have the money, right? I started selling my clothes one by one. حَتَّى بَقِيتُ بِلَا نَفَقٍ. He said, then a time came, I also ran out of money. وَمَضَيْتُ أَطُوفُ مَعَ صَدِيقٍ لِي إِلَى الْمَشْيَخَ. He said, I went with one of my friends to the scholars and the teachers, وَأَسْمَعُ مِنْهُمْ إِلَى الْمَسَاءِ. And I would listen to those scholars until nightfall. فَانْصَرَفَ رَفِيقِي وَرَجَعْتُ إِلَى بَيْتِ خَالِدٍ. He said, my friend went to his place and I came back to an empty house. Because he doesn't have anything, right? He said, فَجَعَلْتُ أَشْرَبُ الْمَاءَ مِنَ الْجُوعِ. So he said, his father, Abu Hatim Razi, his father, he said, I just came back to drink water because of my hunger. But now, until Allah knows the end of this ummah, this Imam will be mentioned because of the rank he reached in the science of hadith. Now this is another beautiful story and it takes the most time. Maybe I should make this one the last one because the quick ones will go faster. So he says that this is a story of, I think it's, no. So he says about, it mentions in the book of Sir al-Alam. So the stories that I'm using, I found an amazing book that I wish is in the house of every Muslim, right? By Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, صفحات من صبر العلماء على شدائد العلم والتحصيل. He said these are pages that mention the stories of the sabr of the ulama and how they sought knowledge. Just stories of their patience. He has some chapters, their patience in traveling, their patience in poverty, their patience in hunger, their patience in no clothes. He classified them, and these he mentions in his muqaddimah, in his beginning of this book. It wasn't a project he did from start to finish. He would read, and over 30 years or so, he read some stories in a book of tafsir and some in a book of language and then he thought, how can I compile all of them? So this is a story that he mentions. It came from Sir al-Alam والنبلاء of Sir al-Alam والنبلاء of Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah, and it's collected in Dhayl Tabaqat al-Hanabila by Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali rahimahullah. That is mentioned in the biography of Abu al-Ala al-Hamadani. Abu al-Ala al-Hamadani, his name is Al-Hasan ibn Ahmad al-Musahal al-Attar. He was a scholar of Qira'ah, Quran and Hadith, and he was a Hafiz of Hadith. He was a Faqih in the Hanbali Madhab. He was an Adib, a master of the Arabic language. He was a historian, and he traveled much, and he had much zuhd, where he preferred the akhirah to dunya. So this is in his story that he mentioned what scholars he took from. He said, ثُمَّ ارْتَحَلَ إِلَى بَغْدَادَ أَرْبَعَ مَرَّاتٍ. Some people, they think it's hard just to go to the next county, just to go cross the bridge to go to class. He said, this scholar, Hamadan is Yemen if I'm not mistaken. He went to Baghdad 4 times. He heard from many of the scholars there. Then he went back to Hamadan. Then he built وَعَمِلَ دَارًا لِلْكُتُبِ وَخَزَانَ. He basically built, you could say, a library or a depository of books. وَوَقَفَ جَمِيعَ كُتُبِهِ فِيهَا. He gave all his books as waqf, endowment there. وَكَانَ قَدْ حَصَلَ الْأُصُولَ الْكَثِيرَ وَالْكُتُبُ النَّادِرَ وَالْكِبَارَ الْحِسَانِ. He had many valuable books that he owned, he put in there. بِالْخُطُوطِ الْمُعْتَبَرَةِ. And in those days, sometimes it's hard to read the handwriting. People's livelihood was, there was no printer, there was no Xerox copier. If you have a book, you would say, I'll pay you this much, write this book by hand for me. That was their livelihood. That's how they did. So he said these books had good handwriting that could be read. وَأَرْبَى عَلَى أَهْلِ زَمَانِهِ فِي كَثْرَةِ السَّمَاعَاتِ. He said that this scholar, he was the most in his time of hearing from others. مَعَ تَحْصِيلِ أُصُولِ مَا سَمِعْ. And he had the books of those that he heard from the other scholars. وَجَوْدَةِ النُّسَخ. And the good quality. وَإِتْقَانِ مَا كَتَبَهُ بِخَطِّ فَإِنَّهُ مَا كَانَ يَكْتُبُ شَيْئًا إِلَّا منقطا معرب. He says وَكَانَ عَفِيفًا مِنْ حب المال مهينا له من أبناء التجار. He mentioned he didn't have much love for wealth and it didn't have much significance to him, even though he was from the descendants of businessmen. فباع جميع ما ورثه وأنفقه في طلب العلم. This is the point I wanted to bring. Abdullah said that he sold. It's not you in trouble. It's just this important thing. He said everything he got in inheritance. He's from a rich family. Everything he got in inheritance, he sold it and he spent it in seeking knowledge. وسافر الكثير ماشيا. Most of his travel he walked by foot. Imagine he's from a rich family, but to get knowledge he sold it and he's walking. حتى سافر إلى بغداد. He traveled to Baghdad, وإلى أصبهان, which is in present day Persia, Iran. مرات ماشيا. He went there many times just walking. يحمل كتبه على ظهره. He carried his books on his back. وأوتي قوة عجيبة في المشي. Allah gave him a special strength ability to walk. كان يمشي في اليوم الواحد 30 فرسخة. In one day he would walk 30 farsakh. So farsakh, how do we know? In like many of the fiqh madhahib, if you want to know how far do I have to go to be a traveler, right? Most of the days you'll hear 50 miles or 48 miles from the calculation of the Hanafiya, right? But the way this was calculated was that first, for every barid, there is one for every 4 barid is 1 farsakh. How do you know what is a barid? So in those days, you didn't have like a GPS or a sticks measuring distance to distance. Barid was, in order to deliver post mail, you would have on a route a horseback rider waiting. So the distance from where the first horseback rider brought the letter to him, that's 1 barid. And then he goes from there to the next rider, that's 2 barid. And then 3 and then 4. So 4 barid is 1 farsakh. Right? So they used to say about 16 farsakh was, if I'm not mistaken, the distance of Safar. I could be wrong. But he's saying in one day he walked 30 farsakh. 30 farsakh. وَكَانَ لَهُ حَظٌ فِي كُلِّ عِلْمٍ. This scholar had a share in every science of Islam. قال كنت أبيت ببغداد في المساجد. He said, I used to sleep in Baghdad in the masajid. وآكل خبز الدخن. And I used to eat like the bread of الذرة. Allahu A'lam. I'm not sure which grain is referring to. Hamoud can correct me if I'm mistaken. But he went through that to seek knowledge. He went there. Okay, let me just finish with the last one, inshallah, because it's taking too long. So this story is a very unique story and many lessons can be brought from it. It's also found in Tabaqat al-Hanabila, and it is about the scholar of the Hanbali madhab, Abu Bakr al-Bazzaz. Abu Bakr al-Bazzaz, rahimahullah. It says that he was born in the year 442 of the Hijrah. 442 of the Hijrah. And he passed away in the year 435 in the city of Baghdad. قال الشيخ الصالح أبو القاسم الخزاز سمعت القاضي أبا بكر محمد بن عبد الباقي بن محمد البزاز الأنصاري يقول. So this is the person who heard this narration from the person who lived it himself. He said, كنت مجاورا بمكة حرسها الله تعالى. He said, one time I was a visitor in Mecca, staying there, may Allah keep it secure and safe. Amen. فأصابني يوما من الأيام جوع شديد. One of these days I had intense hunger. لم أجد شيئا أدفعه به عني الجوع. I couldn't find anything to take my hunger away. فوجدت كيسا من إبريس مشدودا بشرابة من إبريس أيضا فأخذته وجئت به إلى بيتي فحللته فوجدت فيه عقدا من لؤلؤ لم أرى مثله. So he said, I found a case I found a case that was secured, and in that case there was a pearl necklace I've never seen like it before. I've never seen like it before. So look at his intense hunger and look at the wealth he came upon. And Allah will test people. Like the same person that I told you was saying, I didn't pray in 30 years and I want to start. He was saying, you know, if the person doesn't have rizq, what is he going to do? Either he has to kill or he has to steal. I said, who told you that? The Prophet ﷺ said, don't let the seeking of rizq lead you to take it through the disobedience of Allah, because what is with Allah can only be attained through His obedience. Right? Okay. Or some people make this shubha, wherever there's poverty, there's crime. No, if the people have taqwa, you will not find that. In Medina, they were starving, but they didn't go seek it through crime, right? Okay. فَخَرَجْتُ فَإِذَا بِشَيْءٍ يُنَادِي عَلَيْهِ. So, the person, Abu Bakr al-Bazaz, he said, I took out this pearl necklace and I found with it خِرْقَةً فِيهَا 500 dinar. I found with it 500 gold coins. وَهُوَ يَقُولُ هَذَا. Oh, so the person wrote in it, you know, like when you have something, if you lose this, please return it, you will get a reward. So he said, this is for the one who returns to us our valuable that has the pearls in it. So the person, Abu Bakr al-Bazaz, he was honest. He said, فَقُلْتُ أَنَا مُحْتَاج وَأَنَا جَائِعٌ. He said, I'm in need and I'm hungry. فَآخُذُ هَذَا الذَّهَبْ فَأَنْتَفِعُهُ بِهِ وَأَرُدُّ عَلَيْهِ الْكِيسِ. So he said, okay, I'll return him the necklace, but let me just keep the gold. He said, I'll keep the gold. So he said, فَقُلْتُ لَهُ تَعَالْ إِلَيَّ. So he told the owner, I'm assuming, he said, come to me. فَأَخَذْتُهُ وَجِئْتُ بِهِ إِلَى بَيْتِ. So he brought this man who owned this necklace to his house. فَأَعْطَانِي عَلَامَةَ الْكِيسِ. So he described to me what his the bag of the necklace looked like. وَعَلَامَةَ الشُّرَّابَ وَعَلَامَةَ اللُّؤْلُؤِ, and how the pearls looked. وَعَدَدَهُ, how many pearls were on the necklace. وَالْخَيْطَ الَّذِي هُوَ مَشْدُودٌ بِهِ, what type of twine did it have, you know, to tie it. فَأَخْرَجْتُهُ وَدَفَعْتُهُ إِلَيْهِ. I gave him that necklace. فَسَلَّمَ إِلَيَّ 500 dinar. So that man gave him the 500 dinar. فَمَا أَخَذْتُهَا. Imagine he was hungry. He said, I'm not going to take it. وَقُلْتُ يَجِبُ عَلَيَّ أَنْ أُعِيدَهُ إِلَيْكَ. It is obligatory on me to return it to you, he said. وَلَا آخُذَ لَهُ جَزَاءً. I will not take any reward for it. فَقَالَ لِي لَا بُدَّ أَن تَأْخُذَ وَأَلَحْ عَلَيَّ كَثِيرًا. The owner said, you have to take it. And he insisted that I take it. فَلَمْ أَقْبَلْ ذَلِكَ مِنْهُ. So he didn't accept that from him. فَتَرَكَنِي وَمَضَى. So this man left. So look at how the story transitions. وَأَمَّا مَا كَانَ مِنِّي فَإِنِّي خَرَجْتُ مِنْ مَكَّةَ وَرَكِبْتُ الْبَحْرِ. He said after he left Mecca, he went by sea. فَانْكَسَرَ الْمَرْكَبْ وَغَرِقَ النَّاسِ. The boat broke and everyone drowned. وَهَلَكَتْ أَمْوَالُهُمْ. All their wealth drowned. وَسَلِمْتُ أَنَا عَلَى قَطْعَةٍ مِنَ الْمَرْكَبِ. I was saved because I just took a piece of the wood on the ship and it took me to shore. فَبَقِيتُ مُدَّةً فِي الْبَحْرِ لَا أَدْرِي أَيْنَ أَذْهَبْ. He said, time passed, I was in the sea, I don't know which direction to go. فَوَصَلْتُ إِلَى جَزِيرَةٍ فِيهَا قَوْمٍ. He said, I got to some island and there was a people there. فَقَعَدْتُ فِي بَعْضِ الْمَسَاجِدِ. He said, I just sat in some of the masjids on that island. فَسَمِعُونِ أَقْرَأ. So they heard me read the Quran. فَلَمْ يَبْقَى فِي تِلْكَ الْجَزِيرَةِ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا جَاءَ إِلَيَّ وَقَالَ عَلِّمْنِي الْقُرْآنِ. He said, not a person was on that island and he came to me and he said, teach me the Quran. فَحَصَرَ لِي مِنْ أُولَٰئِكَ الْقَوْمِ شَيْءٌ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ الْمَالِ. He said, I got from those people a lot of wealth. Because he's shipwrecked, he's, you know. ثُمَّ إِنِّي رَأَيْتُ فِي ذَلِكَ الْمَسْجِدِ أَوْرَاقًا مِنْ مُصْحَفٍ. He said, then I found in that masjid some pages of a mushaf. Mushaf is when you put the surahs and the ayat of the Quran in one binding, right? So he said, فَأَخَذْتُهَا أَقْرَأ فِيهَا. He said, I took those pages and I read them. فَقَالُوا لِي تُحْسِنُ تَكْتُبْ. They asked him, are you capable of writing? فَقُلْتُ نَعَمْ. He said, yes. So they said, فَقَالُوا عَلِّمْنَا الْخَطْ. Teach us how to write, they said. فَجَاءُوا بِأَوْلَادِهِمْ مِنَ الصِّبْيَانِ وَالشَّبَابِ. They brought their children and the adolescents of their children and the toddlers of their children. فَكُنْتُ أَعْلِمُهُمْ. He said, I started teaching them. فَحَصَلَ لِي أَيْضًا مِنْ ذَلِكَ شَيْءٍ كَثِيرٌ. He said, I also got from this a livelihood. فَقَالُوا لِي بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ. They said to me after, عِنْدَنَا صَبِيَّةً يَتِيمَةً. So this is the story, if you remember the necklace in the game. He said, we have a orphaned, girl. وَلِهَذَا شَيْءٌ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَلَهَا شَيْءٌ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. And she possesses much wealth. نُرِيدُ أَن تَتَزَوَّجَ بِهَا. He said, we want to get you married to her. Right? You with me, Hamoud and Abdullah? So they told him after he was teaching the Quran and how to write, they said, we have a young orphan girl who has a lot of wealth. We want you to marry her. فَامْتَنَعْتُ. So he said, first I hesitated. فَقَالُوا لَابُدْ. They said, you have to. وَأَلْزَمُونِي فَأَجَبْتُ مِنَ اللَّهِ. They compelled me, so he said, I accepted from them. فَلَمَّا زَفُّوهَا إِلَيَّ. When they decorated the girl for her wedding night, مَدَدْتُ عَيْنَيَّ أَنظُرُ إِلَيْهَا. He said, my eyes could not stop looking. فَوَجَدْتُ ذَلِكَ الْعِقْدَ بِعَيْنِهِ مُعَلَّقًا فِي عُنُقِهَا. But the thing was, it wasn't looking just at the girl. The same necklace he found in Mecca when he was hungry and starving and poor, it was on her neck. He saw the necklace on her neck. فَمَا كَانَ لِي حِينَئِذٍ شُغْلٌ إِلَّا النَّظَرِ إِلَيْهِ. He said, I could not stop looking at this necklace. فَقَالُوا يَا شيخ. They said, Sheikh, كَسَرْتَ قَلْبَ هَذِهِ مِنْ نَظَرِكَ إِلَىٰ الْآخِرِ. He said, Sheikh, you broke the heart of your wife. You keep looking at the necklace. You're not looking at her. فَقَالُوا يَا شيخ كسرت قلب هذه اليتيمة. They said, she's also an orphan. من نظرك إلى هذا العقد. You keep looking at the necklace. ولم تنظر إليها. Why don't you look at her? Why you look at the necklace? فقصصت عليهم قصة العقد. He said, I told them the story of this necklace and how I found it. فصاحوا وصرخوا بالتهليل والتكبير. They screamed out لا إله إلا الله. And they said, حتى بلغ إلى جميع أهل الجزيرة. Look at this, the role a father could have in his daughter. He's going to say. So he said, until all the people of the island heard. فَقُلْتُ مَا بِكُمْ. He said, what's the matter? They said, ذَلِكَ الشَّيْخ الَّذِي أَخَذَ مِنْكَ الْعَقْدَ أَبُو هَذِهِ الصَّبِيَّةِ. That man who you brought to your house and asked him what the necklace bag looked like, he is the father of this girl you just married. وَكَانُوا يَقُولُوا مَا وَجَدْتُ فِي الدُّنْيا مُسْلِمًا كَهَذَا الَّذِي رَدَّ عَلَيْهِ هَذَا الْعَقْدِ. He said, the father said, I've never seen a Muslim in this world like the young man who gave me back the necklace. وَكَانَ يَدْعُو وَيَقُولُ. The dua of this father was, اللهم اجمع بيني وبينه حتى أزوجه بابنتي. He said, oh Allah, unite that boy and my daughter so I can marry off my daughter to him. وَالْآنَ قَدْ حَصَلَ. And they said, now this has come true because you married his daughter, even though her father passed away. فَبَقِيتُ مَعَهَا مُدَّةً. So the Qadi Abu Bakr says, I stayed with her, the wife or the bride, for some time. وَرُزِقْتُ مِنْهَا وَلَدَيْنِ. I was given from her 2 sons by Allah's will. ثُمَّ إِنَّهَا مَاتَتْ. So then the wife passed away. فَوَرِثْتُ الْعِقْدَ أَنَا وَوَلَدَيَ. So now this necklace became inherited between me and my 2 sons. ثُمَّ مَاتَ الْوَلَدَانِ. Then my 2 sons passed away. فَحَصَلَ الْعِقْدُ لِي. Then the necklace came back to me. فَبِعْتُهُ بِمِئَةِ أَلْفَ دِينَارٍ. He said, I sold this necklace for 100,000 gold coins. وَهَذَا الْمَالُ الَّذِي تَرَوْنَهُ مَعِي مِنْ بَقَايَ ذَلِكَ الْمَالِ. He says, whatever wealth he was telling the people at this time that you see of me was from that wealth. Maybe another night I can go over the other story I just remembered, which also shows how much wealth was spent. But Jazakumullah khair. The point was that this man, before he got to this, you can say, championship ending, he was so hungry in Mecca he could not find anything. Right? Remember that. But he was still persistent in attaining knowledge. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us. May Allah forgive us. May Allah send His mercy on us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to reach Ramadan with afiyah and iman. And may Allah take the suffering away from all the Muslimin. Ameen. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Wa shukran la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.